I think he must be mad at me because he is usually used to be, once upon a time, a regular on the program, but we never hear from him anymore. And we do miss him. I guess he's spending a lot of time now that his wife, Callista, is the ambassador to the Vatican, the Holy See. And how are you, Mr. Speaker?
I'm doing great, and I miss being on the show. And I just told Linda we're going to do it a lot more often. I love having a chance to chat with you about all the different things we're doing and how country's evolving.
Well, the first thing that I wanted to point out is you look at the president, he's got the highest approval rating now he's had in some time. And this is after, he's been through nonstop abuse about Russia, the creepy interviews of Anderson Cooper with women that may or may not have been with him 12, 15 years ago, whatever it is. But then you got the president, what a day he had yesterday. He signed a proclamation. He's sending the National Guard to the border. The president has now opened up that people can create their own health care cooperatives and buy in bulk and buy across state lines, a way of circumventing Obamacare. The president now has moved towards energy independence. We have now 3 million jobs that have been created in the country. Then you look at, even in the CNN poll, the president gained 8 points with men since February, 5 points with young voters, 9 points with middle-aged voters, and 10 points with college graduates. Then you have the lowest unemployment rate in the African-American and Hispanic communities. And I'm looking at, things are really changing for the better, and people are beginning to feel it. And I think the media is just lost in these narratives that they can't get out of.
Well, I did my newsletter at Gingrich Productions, and the title of it basically was Trump up, elite media down. And I think they lost. I think they threw in the kitchen sink for 30 days. I think they thought, boy, this will really get him. And the country, first of all, as Rasmussen has reported, by something like 52-5, the country now believes that the elite media lies. I mean, 52-5 is really a big number.
No, it's even bigger. 77% of Americans now believe that news media is absolutely involved in fake news. 77.
So what that means is they try to beat up Trump and people just shrug it off. Now, I don't think anybody, at these various networks and newspapers realize what they've actually done is they haven't hired Trump. They've destroyed themselves. Because people get to, one of the things Trump understood beginning in 2015 that in retrospect was amazing was if you're seeing him on television, unscripted, sometimes he's clumsy, sometimes he's brilliant, but you get the sense he's always authentic because he's never scripted, he's never in some kind of set-up deal. And after a while, people begin to go, that's the real guy.
Look at what else he did.
The real guy with all the phony reporters.
When the president signed the $1.3 trillion omnibus bill, and I was pretty disgusted by that omnibus bill, I go, I'm never doing this again, but Congress had pretty much left town, so he really didn't have a choice, and he wanted the authorization for the defense funds. Now the president, as he has done many times, he goes back into the law, and he's been able to find a way that there is a 1974 act called the Impoundment Control Act, which gives him the authority to cancel spending that was already approved by Congress. You only need a 51 majority in the Senate, and Congress has 45 days to approve of the request of the president to cut it. Now, I would think that's an opportunity for Republicans to stand for small government and fiscally responsible budgets.
Well, I think it is. I think, frankly, that, and I wrote about this at the time, having lived through the Reagan years as a member of Congress supporting Reagan, he always had three goals. National security first, economic growth second, balance the budget third. And I thought, candidly, that Reagan would have signed this bill. Because I think Reagan would have said, with Secretary Mattis, retired four-star Marine general, saying to him, Obama has so radically weakened our military that we're putting our young men and women at risk every single day that we don't fix it. And I think as a commander-in-chief, Trump felt that was his number one priority, and I agree with it. With deregulation and with tax cuts, he's begun to work on economic growth, which was Reagan's second goal. And you saw the numbers this week of continued application for more and more jobs. Last year, I believe over 2 million people left food stamps and went to work.
Correct.
By the way, it's worth almost $5 billion a year every single year in savings. And so, things are moving in the right direction. But it'll be interesting to watch if they design it correctly. The rescission bill, which is what it's called, the rescission bill could put people in Congress in some very difficult challenges because some of the stuff is so stupid that it's really hard to go home and defend it.
What do you make now? It's been a long time since I've interviewed you, and you're going to join me on TV tonight. We'll get into more details. Now that we've discovered so much about Robert Mueller and Mueller's team, and it's been, 14 months, and here we are, we have 3 committees looking into Trump-Russia collusion. There's no evidence. And, then everything that we see in terms of the overreach by Mueller and the fact that he put a very biased team together to do all of this with, I think, some of the greatest corruption issues and problems and ethical problems that I've ever seen of any special counsel. What is your take on it at this point, and what should happen?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that we do have a new attorney who was brought in by Attorney General Sessions to look into the corruption and the way in which the Clinton scandals and the Clinton illegality was handled. I think that's an important step in the right direction. Second, I think it's very telling, as you put it correctly, with all of these very high-powered Democratic lawyers, with all of this effort, Mueller this week said, the president's really not the target of the investigation. Now, if in fact this continues into the summer and we discover, say around August, that there's nothing there at all, that even Mueller can't find anything, the left is going to have a really big problem because they have banked so much of their energy, so much of their enthusiasm around the notion that Trump did something wrong, that if even Mueller ends up saying, in the end, there ain't nothing there, I think you're going to see an enormous collapse of energy on the left.
What do you think of the argument that is now going on? Because we appear to be at the end of the investigation. And, by that, what do we mean? We mean that now they're having discussions and some negotiations of some kind about questions the special counsel wants to ask the president. Now, collusion is not a crime. There is no underlying crime. The idea that they want to know why the president fired James Comey, well, Rod Rosenstein would be witness number one. He's got more conflicts of interest in this than anybody. And how do we get to, the real investigations? It is the evidence is overwhelming. Hillary obstructed justice, violated 18 U.S. Code 793, mishandled and destroyed classified information. Then she deleted subpoenaed emails, acid washed her hard drive, and then beat up her devices with a hammer. And then people like Comey and Strzok and Page and McCabe and Loretta Lynch, they were all involved in an exoneration before they ever investigated or even interviewed her. And then, of course, it was Hillary that paid for Russian propaganda to manipulate the general election in her favor, and that then becomes the basis, even though it's unverified, and they never tell a FISA court that she paid for it, as a FISA warrant to spy on a Trump campaign associate in the lead up to the campaign. What do we do with that?
Well, that's where I think that the Attorney General, having appointed this prosecutor to look into it, took a step in the right direction. I think they are reopening all of that. I think they thought they had to reopen it because there are so many different crimes that are associated now with the Clinton campaign, the Clinton staff, the Clinton Foundation. It's almost impossible to avoid having to look into it and dig into it. I think that will become, as we get into the fall, as all of the attacks on the president disappear, I think that will reappear as something that is just astonishing. And, it really is. Every time I try to understand it myself, and then like you, I've spent a lot of time on this, it is so complicated. There are so many different things that were illegal and wrong and unexplainable that we almost need an encyclopedia of corruption. Do
you know how hard it is to explain this every day? I mean, we have new developments every single day, and the difference between what we have reported, Mr. Speaker, and what the rest of the media has reported on Trump-Russia collusion is we actually have the evidence. We actually have the text messages. We actually found out Hillary did pay for the phony dossier. She did fire a foreign agent. She did erase subpoenaed emails. She did acid wash the hard drive. You know, Strzok and Comey in particular did write an exoneration before an investigation. I'm not making any of this up. We have evidence. They don't.
Well, one of the most amazing things about all this, I guess the reason I remain an optimist, is that facts do matter. And in a free society over time, facts do outweigh propaganda. And the facts of their corruption, this is the perfect example of deep state. Think of the people you're describing. Describing very, very senior people in the Justice Department, very, very senior people in the FBI, very, very senior people in the State Department. And I think, it may well reach all the way up to President Obama, but clearly there was a level of corruption here unprecedented in American history, and I believe it's all going to keep coming out. As I've said to you before, these things have a tendency to start unraveling, and as they unravel, more and more pieces fall apart, and it just becomes kind of mildly amazing.
Well, I hope we do get to the truth. How do you think all of this impacts the 2018 midterms? And if you could give advice to Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and the president, and here we are in April, these elections coming fast in November, what would your advice be so this, media predicted blue wave doesn't materialize?
Well, my first advice would be to have the Senate adopt a series of reforms so they could actually approve all the people the president sent up there. I mean, it really weakens America. Forget whether you're a Democrat or Republican. It weakens America to have Chuck Schumer blocking so many different appointments all around the world in a way which is really unconscionable and unpatriotic. So that'd be my first piece of advice, and you'd see the Senate starting to become a lot more effective. Second, I think they have to keep hammering away at the tax cuts. Every single Democrat voted against the tax cuts. The tax cuts are clearly working. And I think going to the country this fall saying, if you want your taxes to go up, vote Democrat. If you want to create more jobs, vote Republican, is a pretty good dividing line. And then third, I think they've got to bring up issues that matter. I think people want to see a work requirement for welfare. I think people want to see drug testing for people who are going to get government aid. I think there are a number of steps we could take that would clearly distinguish the two parties and would remind people that there's a huge difference in terms of who wins.
All right, we got to take a break. Former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor, will actually join us on Hannity. For some reason, he has abandoned us now for a while. He's been spending, I guess, a lot of time at the Holy See in the Vatican. 800-941-SEAN is our number. You want to be a part of the program. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll continue. All right, as we continue with former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor, Newt Gingrich, here's the most compelling argument I think that you can make for 2018, and that is Nancy Pelosi, A, is going to rescind the tax cuts that the Republicans passed. More importantly, I don't have any doubt in my mind that if Nancy Pelosi is Speaker, that they will find something to try and impeach this president with. Do you agree with that?
Well, I agree. In fact, you have a number of Democrats now running for Congress who have signed pledges that if they get elected, they will automatically vote for impeachment no matter what, whether there's any reason to or not. But in addition, I just want to say, I've watched with real surprise as the Democrats have turned into an anti-Semitic socialist party. I mean, you look at the people who are running in these primaries, you look at the attitude of a large number of Democrats towards people like Farrakhan, who's clearly an overt anti-Semitic person. And you realize that this is a party which is going to a radical view in a way which would be pretty scary. If they were to get power in the House, as radical as they're becoming, I think it would really be scary for the country.
Yeah, I think you're right. We used to have blue dog Democrats. Zell Miller, who recently passed away, we both knew well. I mean, Zell Miller was a good man, and he was a Democratic governor in Georgia at the time, and very different party.
If you remember, Zell ultimately endorsed George W. Bush, spoke at the Republican National Convention in 2004. I knew Zell 1963 on. I dropped out of college and ran a congressional campaign. Zell was a young state senator running in a Democratic primary. And so we had a friendship that went for a long time. And when he came to Washington as a senator, he asked me to come over for breakfast one morning. And I was happy to do it because he's a great guy. And he said he wanted to apologize to me. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you used to tell me how left-wing the Democratic Party was in Washington, and I didn't believe you. He said, now that I'm here and I'm in the room, he said, they're worse than you said they were.
I had to apologize to him once because I was so hard on him when I was a radio host in Atlanta, and then we became great friends. He'll be missed. Mr. Speaker, we'll see you tonight on Hannity. Great to have you back, and I hope you're enjoying Italy. Thank you, sir.